I'm Toria Driver.
And I am Katina Horton. Welcome to Heart Podcast.
Heart to Heart is a platform that confronts grief. It's a candid and biblical couch conversation on navigating grief and loss, vulnerability, authenticity, and grace, love, truth, and compassion, so we can take the necessary steps to move forward to give voice to our pain and stories and heal.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Heart to Heart Grief Podcast. And I'm Toria.
And I am Katina Horton, and we got a guest here today.
Yay.
Tiffany. Yes.
Hi,
yes.
Tiffany.
Hi.
Welcome to Heart to Heart Grief
Thank you.
Podcast.
Yes, to the Heart
What
to
a
Heart Grief
pleasure to have you
Podcast.
here.
Thank you.
Amen. Thank you for taking the time out to come and visit with us today.
I'm honored you asked.
Yes.
So, Tiffany, we wanted to bring you on because we know that you are one who's been through, as most of us, we've been through grief, but you have overcome and battled that grief and stepped forward, and you are doing something amazing with it, through it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the thing that brought you to the grief,
Yeah.
heart thing.
Yeah. Do you want me to tell the story?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was a classroom teacher. I was teaching kindergarten back in 2020 when we went into COVID. And we were really enjoying that time as a family. So our kids were 5 and 7 at the time, and we had them home, and everybody was working from home. And, there were stressors, but we were really loving it. And we just had like an outdoor gathering with some family one day, and my husband ended up going into the hospital that night and just died very suddenly within about 24 hours.
Wow.
So he ended up dying from acute pancreatitis, with no warning to us. So as you can imagine, that completely upends your life and sends you sort of into a shock spiral, and I think shock is probably the best way to describe it. Thankfully, Mike and I were very involved at Vineyard Church, and I was a teacher in a local school, and we have family nearby, so we had an amazing response of support for our family. And even though it was COVID, most people who knew us well sort of loosened the restrictions a little so that they could come over and support us and, do the sort of normal things of bringing us food. But then I really feel like people stepped up in such kind ways, especially with the kids, and, took the kids for me so I could have some time to myself, and just, sent people over to do the dishes or mow the lawn or all the things that you just have to kind of maintain in life. But yeah, it's been sort of a long journey. So that was in 2020, and a lot has happened since then.
Now we're in 2026, and I know you from the Vineyard Church, Evanston Vineyard Church, and I remember that you and Mike, your husband, that you guys used to do worship and sing, and it was beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so that was 20?
Yeah, we
2020?
probably started that in about 2017, and did that for maybe 2018, did it for a few years at the church. And in COVID, we led some live worship sessions on Facebook, and that was a really important thing to us as a couple. I have not done that since. It's just been too hard to sort of engage in that, and I just can't. Yeah.
I understand. That's understandable. But thank you again for sharing your story, your vulnerable stuff.
Sure.
I'm so grateful that you're sharing with our audience as well. So thank you so much. We did have some questions that you wanted to.
Sure. And so
What I was wondering is, what advice do you think you would give someone when it comes to processing grief in general, and then specifically with the loss of a spouse?
Yeah. I mean, advice is hard because I think since losing Mike, I have done several different projects where I work with other young widows, and so I've really learned that everybody processes grief so differently. And what worked for me might not work for other people, and the kinds of things I wanted support-wise could have been totally opposite to what my friends, for lack of a better term, wanted. But I found that for me, it was really important to move my body, just to sort of feel that sense of aliveness, because I think there was so much heaviness and, tunnel vision and fog through sort of every step of that experience that I needed to do things that sort of jolted me out of that feeling, so I could recognize myself and still feel like, okay, there's hope for life. I also found a lot of joy in going to the lake and watching the sunrises. I found it was really a great place for me to connect with God and, sometimes be mad and just let out my anger with Him because I know He could handle it.
Amen.
But I felt like I got a little slice and glimpse of heaven watching the sunrise, and it made me feel closer to Mike. It made me feel closer to God, and this is really terrible and awful, but to watch the beauty every day and to see like the sun still rises every day was just critical for me. So
yes.
What was the question?
Yeah, but no, you answered as far as giving advice, what advice you would give to someone that's processing. And then just to spin off of that because Tora probably have hers too, I'm just asking you this because it's fresh in my mind since you mentioned about you can be angry with God.
Yeah.
I had in here about, how the Bible verse says to be ye angry and sin not. But it's a lot of Christians have taken it out of context and changed it over to don't be angry. I don't know, have you had to deal with any of that when it comes to yours? And then what's your take on that kind of behavior when it comes to grieving?
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like I had a lot of control over it. I feel like there were kind of parallel things happening in my heart. One was, the instant Mike died, I felt like, well, God gives and He takes away. And this is not my, why not me, right? Everybody goes through hard things, and why not him? So there was that, and then there was and with that, there was a very deep sense of, I know that God has a plan. I do not understand it. I will not ever really understand, but I trust God's plan, and I trust His goodness, and that at the end of the day, God is love, and this is part of the human experience. At the same time, I probably rolled my eyes at people who would have said anything like that to me. And I just felt like, why? Like, why? Mike had so much living to do left and so many things he wanted to accomplish. And these young children who are growing up without their dad. And for a long time, I was just really angry with God and whatever this plan was.
Right.
And I found it very difficult to go back to church. And, anybody who was sort of writing books about grief that were talking about God's plan, I just couldn't read them at the time. And
Right.
it was hard for me. But I since have been remarried, and my now husband was very good from the get-go about saying to me, your feelings as a human are totally valid, but God is good no matter what. And you have to trust that, and just you have to lean into the fact that this is God's plan. And I just wanted to be like, but, and he was like, yeah, you can do that. But
Right. It's duality,
but
right?
God is good.
Both and, right? At the same time.
And it can be both and.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that really helped me, and walking alongside him and kind of reinvestigating my faith with his sort of solid wisdom of like, I know you've been through a really hard thing, but at the end of the day, we go to God. And it would just really help me to kind of reestablish my relationship with God and come to a place where I'm probably that annoying person to somebody else who is like, I know this is really hard, but it's just in God's plan, you know.
So trying to focus on his character as far as the goodness. You know how all those characteristics of God, his faithfulness and character, kind of help you to, you know,
Absolutely.
to stay grounded.
Yeah, he never changes. Yeah.
So do you think that your relationship with God kind of helped cushion the blow?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And, you know, it's interesting for me to watch some of my, I'll call them peers, right? Because I've made many young widow friends online over the years. And to watch the way that those who sort of have a deep faith from before, how they come through this experience, I think, very differently than those who don't. And I don't know if it's just a sense of knowing, right, that everything will be okay. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, that carried me through. And, you know, there's something about having hopefulness that I trust that things are going to be okay. And they have been, you know.
Amen.
It was really, really hard. But having that deep down trust was critical, I think.
Yeah, and kind of just brought you through it.
Yeah.
Just having that relationship with the Lord. And you mentioned about your children and how the community really helped during that time.
Yeah.
They like put their arms around you and the children.
Yeah.
And just really stood in the gap for you.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, do you think? Let me just put it. Say this first. I remember that I saw a video, and it brings tears to my eyes just thinking about it. The video of you sitting on your lawn in chairs as people were coming by.
Yeah, that was powerful.
It was so powerful.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, my neighbors. So, like I said, Mike died during COVID, and we were at that point where it was 6 feet social distancing, and everybody wanted to be there for us, but there was only one way really they could do it. And so what they did is everybody stood outside of their houses on the entire block, and they put together a little service. They sang a song, and a few people read verses, and they put a table out in front of our house, and my whole family had chairs set up, and everybody just walked by and dropped a flower and vases for us, and, you know, blew us kisses and air hugs, and, you know, it was very symbolic of the fact that they were all there for us, but they really meant it. And, you know, like I said, they would show up and cut the grass without me asking, and they sent me money to go get a massage, you know, just things like that. And consistently they were there, and they would invite us over for dinner so I didn't have to cook, things like that. Yeah, I mean, people, I think, in my experience, and I know this isn't everybody's, but losing somebody really brought out the goodness of humanity. It was like you could just see people's heart and that they wanted to help, and you know, it's kind of like everybody's worst nightmare, I think, to lose their favorite person in the world, and then, you know, so then people just show up and support you. So
that's
great.
so good. So we talked about God and how having a relationship with the Lord helped you through this, and then community, how important it is to have community that will stand in the gap for you and help do those things that you just don't want to do. Was there ever a time, Tiffany, where you felt stuck, that you felt like, you know what, I just don't
Of
want
course.
to do this?
Of course, yes. Yeah, I think there's like, maybe the first 6 months are a little, I don't know, there's just so much support in that time. And then when you kind of get back into the regular routine of life and go back to work, and for me it was when the winter hit, that first winter after Mike died. I just felt like this was impossible, you know, like raising the kids on my own and trying to keep a job, and I don't know, just I live a pretty joyful life. Like before this, you know, I put a lot of effort into living a joyful life, and so this was such a stark contrast, and I'd never really lived like that. I know that's a privilege. I know everybody's life isn't like that, but to me, I just didn't feel like myself, and it was really hard to get through that. For me, I just had to have something to look forward to, which is where travel became a huge part of my life, and sometimes that just meant like driving to a friend's house for the weekend or something. And, you know, sometimes it was bigger trips, but I just needed some carrot to work towards to make it through those really hard days, especially with such little kids. Yeah.
Just something to help you. Would you say that traveling helped to ground you?
I don't know if it was grounding. I sort of think about it like it reminded me, sort of like the sunrise thing, that there is still so much beauty in the world, you know. And then also, for me, grief is like a bubble, right? It was like your whole life, we were just living our same life, except now Mike was out of it. So it was like everything was painful, and everything reminded us of him. And everywhere we went, we were looked at as like, you know, the widow and kids, right? So I felt very like in a fishbowl. And so traveling felt like we could just go somewhere else and not be widow and grieving children first. And that was really nice. And, you know, I think being in nature is also just so powerful as a way to connect with God and to see your sort of scale in the world and to see like, okay, the world still goes on and everything is still beautiful, and our pain is acute, but it's not the end of the story.
Amen. And that so makes sense. Like you said, there's still life. Everything is still going on. You know, and I remember a friend of mine once saying, because her father had passed, and she was just like, well, I don't understand how everybody can just keep going on doing everything that they're doing every day, and my dad died. So you see what I'm saying? So she was trying to say, she was struggling with that, like, how does life keep going, but I've had this to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, and especially, like, for us, you know, when the kids are little and they're in 100 activities, and you're bringing them to things, and you're seeing all these families, and, you know, you're like, oh, God, we're the only ones whose dad died, and, you know, in this situation. Really powerful moment for me is the kids and I traveled to Guatemala not too long after Mike died, and we walked into this house, and we were with a local family, and we walked into this house, and it was like a grandmother and her 2 daughter-in-laws, and those young women who were married but didn't yet have children, both of their husbands were abroad working, right? So they were here in the United States and they were working, and I said, you know, when are they going to come back? And they were like, we don't know. You know, we don't have much communication with them, and we're just kind of waiting. And I just remember, and their house was very, very simple, right? It was like essentials, basics only. And I just remember standing there and thinking, we're not living the hardest thing. People live really hard through really hard experiences. And, you know, it feels like everything when you're next to another family, and, you know, you feel like something's been taken from you. But then you realize, like, our life could be so many different things, and it kind of opens up possibility and just perspective on what you're going through.
True.
Tiffany, I want to know about your children. What was the best thing that could have happened to help them through this tough experience?
I don't know that I could say what the best thing was, because my decisions to travel with them and you know,
to keep them moving.
To keep them moving and to keep us busy. I don't know that it was the healthiest thing. It was just what we did. You know, that's just kind of what I felt like I needed that to survive. I'm sure if the textbook answer is probably stability and consistency, but that didn't seem feasible to me. That felt like just too painful. And because of the way we have sort of done things, and there's been a lot of change. We did wait a couple of years before we moved out of our house and everything, but they've really become incredibly resilient and flexible. And, you know, like me, they've learned, okay, there are huge disappointments in life and hard things, and then you learn how to keep going despite them. So, I mean, I really think just them knowing how many people were in their corner was critical for them. And like you said, to be part of a community, you know, like people who aren't locked into a community at all before something like this happens, I think it's really hard because they don't have support, and then they don't have anybody to be with their kids or other voices in their kids' lives saying, you know, we're here for you. And it was really nice for my kids that they had my brother to be there, my dad to be there, and other male figures in their life since Mike was gone. And I think all of that it all came together to be important for them.
Wow,
That's
that's so
powerful.
good. Yeah,
That
it's
is very powerful. What do you wish people knew about grief?
Oh, that's a hard one. I guess I hope that people will be gracious with people who are grieving, because I think it's hard to really grasp what a long journey it is when you're grieving, whether it's grieving a parent or a sibling or a spouse or whatever kind of grief it is. I think people give like a tiny little window of time, and then they sort of expect that person will be back to normal. And obviously it depends on the relationship with the person who's died. But, as a widow, I feel like it took at least 2 full years before I was able to even like sort of function as myself. And I expected grace from people. I don't know that everybody could have given it, but I think grace and understanding and time, I think, are things that, it's really nice if those are extended.
Yeah.
Grace, understanding, and time.
I like
Those
that.
three.
Grace, understanding, and time. Wow. What's one thing you're looking forward to doing now that you couldn't do before?
I think because we're coming up on 6 years actually since Mike died. So I've probably done a lot of those things already.
Okay.
So about 2 years after Mike died, I decided that I just had this realization like, oh, I can actually do whatever I want. Like I don't have to run my ideas by another adult, which can be both freeing and completely overwhelming. But I was a teacher, and so in the summers I really wanted to travel, but his job kept him here. He could maybe go for a week or something, but so I just had this realization like, oh, I can just go if I want to. And so I decided I was going to take the kids out of school for a year and travel with them around the world. We made it 7 months because like traveling with just the kids by myself was challenging, as you can imagine. It was also amazing, but it was hard. But the ability to do that, that's quite a leap. But even like on a smaller scale, for a summer we went and did a road trip through Spain for a month because I could, right?
Wow.
And we would have never done that with Mike.
Road trip to Spain.
Yeah, we just went to Portugal and rented a car and did a month-long trip through Portugal and Spain. And
That's amazing.
yeah, it's just like for me it was very much like the hardest thing has already happened, the worst thing, and I think I'm capable of this, and like life is short, you never know how many days you have, and so let's just go do the things we want to do. And we were very fortunate to be able to afford that, and I've learned ways to travel without spending a lot of money, and that makes it really possible for us. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have another question. What advice would you give to someone who's struggling to connect with others after a loss?
I think maybe to be patient with yourself, because relationships inevitably are going to change. I think a lot of, if I'm thinking of my own story, all of my closest people were really amazing and have been amazing. But as the years have progressed, those relationships inevitably change. They were one thing while Mike was around, and then they were another thing after he died, and they were like I needed them to make it through and to survive that time. And then now that I'm remarried, it's another thing again, because, your interactions with them just change according to the other people in your life too. So I think maybe to expect that there will be shifts in relationships, and in terms of connecting with other people, I don't know, I think it's okay to like just give yourself a little bit of a break and to not feel like you have to be excited to see people all the time. And I remember walking through the halls at work and just being very tunnel visioned and just avoiding eye contact so people didn't ask me how I was doing, because if they did, I was going to fall apart. And, you know, but then also simultaneously reaching out to friends when I needed somebody, you know. So sometimes I would call my brother and be like, can you just come sit at my house for a few hours so my kids give their attention to somebody else, because I just need to not be the only adult here, you know. And he would just come and like watch TV with them, and it was a blessing for me. And so to be able to ask for help when you need it.
That's important to be able to ask, because it doesn't come easy for everyone.
Oh, yeah.
There are people who
That is
just
hard.
don't like it and just prefer not to. So that's a good one too.
One thing, sorry, can I add one thing to that?
Absolutely.
One thing I try to remind people is that like when you're asking for help from someone, you're actually doing them a service too, because they want to help you, especially if you're going through a season of grief. I found people were desperate to help, right? And when they say, let me know if there's anything I can do, that's kind of annoying, because you're like, oh, I don't know.
Or
I
what
just
am I
need help
gonna
with
tell you?
everything. Yeah, but also it's, the heart is that they want to be able to help you, and they know that they're sort of powerless in the situation. So if you can give them something to do to actually help you out, it makes people feel good.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's good.
That is really good, I tell you. Now, do you have any advice that you would give to people on the other side of it, as far as trying to force connection with the person that's grieving?
Yeah, I think for me it was very much about like just knowing that whoever I was that day was who I was that day. Like my moods were all over the place. I remember my best friend telling me, I have no idea who's going to walk in the door every time you come over, you know, whether I was going to be excited about something or a total mess or somewhere in between. And she was very good about just listening to me and being my vent person. But other people in my life, you know, maybe I pushed away a little because I don't know, I couldn't take on their hard stuff. I had my own hard thing.
Right, because you had to deal with, you know, you had the capacity
Not
just to
having
deal
we
with
talked
that.
about that. Like
Yeah.
I just don't have the capacity. I was telling
Right,
someone,
remember
I was
we
like,
talked about
I
that?
can't do. I just don't have the capacity for it right now. And just
Yeah.
knowing your limits. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would say, I saw like an image early on that I felt like was very helpful for me and everyone supporting us, that, you know, it's like concentric circles, and everybody should be supporting in towards the center, like the person who has lost the most, right? So for us, obviously, that would have been the kids and I, and our immediate people were pushing in to support us, and then those people were pushing in to support those people. But there was no complaining at us about how their life was hard or challenges they were going through. And I know that's unrealistic permanently, but for the season of deep grief, it's just too hard to hear other people's small regular life complaints when you're dealing with something so big. So I think that's a good piece of advice, is find other friends to complain to.
Yes.
That's true during
Yeah.
that season, right? Yep. It's something that you mentioned there, because I have a friend of mine that recently lost someone close to her, and I just listened to what she had to say, you know, allow her to get her anger out. And then I said in my head, under no circumstances, since I know what I know about grief now, will I even begin to mention some of the drama going on in my life.
Right.
I
You
just
just let
know.
her have her.
Yes.
Yeah. And you have
Yes.
you have to let them have their
Yeah.
people have their space.
And
Yeah.
not necessarily offer advice or try to make it
No,
better,
right,
but just
right.
listen.
Just
That's it.
listen.
Because you can't make it better.
Yeah.
You see what I'm
cannot.
saying?
You cannot.
Right. You can't undo
Yeah.
what's been done.
That's right.
One of my favorite stories to tell is one. There was a time where I was just feeling just depressed and just down, and one of my friends came over to my house, and we sat on the couch. She sat on one end and I sat on the other. We watched movies, and she started putting her rollers in her hair. She laid at one end, I laid at the other end, and she just was there with me. She was just there with me. I didn't want to talk about anything. I just needed someone to just be with me.
Yeah.
And she was, and she understood the assignment.
Yeah, yeah. Because if somebody comes over and they're chatty and you don't have the energy
Like,
for
I
that.
don't have the capacity
Yeah.
for that.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So she understood. It's funny how we got a lot of questions here. As you've been talking, you've been answering. Like I'm
Yes.
going through, you've been answering
She's been
a lot
answering
of between what I wrote down and what my cousin wrote down. You've been answering a lot of them. One thing I wanted to ask you that I see I've got down here. What are some ways you found new meaning and purpose during the holiday season after that happened?
Oh, yeah, that's so
good.
hard.
Yeah.
I will tell you, I still think the holidays are hard.
Mm-hmm.
Even having gone through them 6 times now, I just think it's still hard.
Mm-hmm.
The holidays are really focused on traditions, at least in my family. And my family is like, they want to do the same exact thing every year on repeat. And then when you take an important person out of that, it just feels so painful. So I have tried as much as I can to allow myself to say no to some things. I can't say no to everything because I just, I still have people that are important to me that I don't want to fully upset. But if I could do whatever I want, I would leave for all of the holidays.
Gotcha.
I
Go
know that
somewhere.
that's not realistic. But yeah, I think like on a smaller scale, it's about trying to find some new traditions or new things that will make it feel a little different for you. And like, okay, this is a new season and a new way we're going to do it.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a ton of good advice other than just, try to find new things, try to see how you can mix it up in any way, and allow yourself to say no if it's becoming overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. Know the capacity.
Yeah.
And sometimes you say yes to something doing that, and then you're like, oh, this is beginning to be too much. I probably need to, like, after an hour or two, go home. Sometimes you don't know. You get to that place and you don't, or you're on the way, Yeah, so I know that grief during the holiday season, that's just a challenging time of the year anyway.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
And then you add the, loss onto it, and then it just makes it even more challenging, because the holiday times is hard for me as well with our family having so much loss, and then, me suffering a lot of trauma around the time of my divorce and whatnot. So, like you said, every year you're trying to figure out what new thing you're going to do. And it's almost like I have to remind myself every year it might look different.
Yes.
So don't expect just because last year you did this with so-and-so,
Yep.
this year they're going to be available to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
You see what I'm
Right.
saying?
It may
Yeah.
look a little bit different.
It might look a
And
little
just
bit
being
different.
open to the changes, the different.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
things,
that's what I have to tell.
Yeah.
Yep, that's what I've been
Just
telling
being
myself.
open to it. Okay, don't
And
expect it. Yeah.
And I
Right.
think your identity changes so much also.
That's good.
I thought of myself very much as like life of the party, and I want to close down every party, be the last one to go home.
Gotcha.
But sometimes I just need to go for an hour and then excuse myself.
Ah.
And be okay with that, and be
Yep.
okay with everybody else around me knowing I'm not the same as I used to be, and I'm not going to be the same, and that's okay.
Yep.
And that's okay.
That is so true.
You have to be okay with that, and you
And
have to
that's
have your
hard.
boundaries. Yeah, there goes that capacity again. That capacity.
That
is having
capacity,
knowing
it go back to
capacity.
that word,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you said, it goes back to, and it's something that you mentioned with identity, because I had that in here, that how do you think your identity shifted both before and after the loss?
Oh my gosh, so many ways. I mean, I think before Mike and I were married for 14 years, the kids were young, we were like in that phase of life where we were sort of like, okay, I think we like sort of have this parenting thing figured out, we're in a good rhythm, I think my identity is constantly shifting since losing him. And I really feel like there have been different phases
Okay.
after his loss as well. I mean, I still struggle with identity shifts. And you envision your life one way, and then something big happens, and everything changes, and you just can't keep going with that vision. You can't like bulldoze through it because it's impossible.
Right.
I mean, even now, this is such a small example, but and I know the goal of the podcast is not political, but I even as an American, like I feel like, oh, sometimes I'm grieving the identity of what I thought American was and what it is now. And you know, I don't know, it's always sort of just on my mind. Who am I now versus who was I before?
Right.
What's possible?
And being kind of open, like we talked
Being
about with the
open.
holidays, every time being new, but realizing, and then me and you have talked about this before too, about there being different versions of us as we heal and grow and do our self-work. Remember we were talking about that and the introspective work that, like, who we were 15, 20 years ago, we're not those people anymore. A year ago, sometimes a few months. You know what I'm saying? Because
we're constantly changing, evolving our mindsets, our emotions, even our looks, right? We change or getting older. And
and then you start going, I don't like that anymore.
I mean, I think not that there's ever a silver lining to grief, but I do think one of the positives that comes out of a traumatic loss is, you know, you see things really differently. And I think one of them is flexibility, right? And a building of empathy for other people and perspective. And part of that, I think, is just realizing, like, you know, life really could be anything. And we're part of making it what we want it to be, but also we have to be open to the idea that it could change drastically at any time.
That's one of my favorite verses. Those in Zion who mourn, I will take away the ashes on their head, and I will give them a crown. I will take away their sadness, and I will give them the oil of happiness. I will take away their sorrow, and I will give them celebration clothes. He sent me to name them good trees and the Lord's wonderful plants.
Excuse me.
That's in Isaiah. And so that verse just kept ringing in my head as I was thinking about the podcast for today. And I thought about rebuilding joy travel. And out of the ashes is this wonderful thing has been birthed out. And for you, but not just for you. And it's the trauma, the tragedy that happened in your life, something good is coming out of that. And it's going to help so many others.
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, I think because I'm a teacher by trade, it is just kind of in me to want my work to be helping other people. And I very clearly saw, as I engaged with other widows on Instagram, that there is a wide range of the way people respond to the situation. And I think for many reasons, in large part because I had a very stable and secure upbringing. I had a strong faith. I had an incredibly supportive community, and frankly have lived a life of great privilege, right? I think having all of that stability going into this loss made it so that I felt like I could, despite intense heartbreak, right, and struggle, and it was really hard, I could still do it and move forward, right, and move through it with knowledge that I would be okay. And I think not everybody has that. Some of those elements aren't there for them, or they just really struggle in the aftermath of their loss. And I felt like I could do something to help. And I have sort of dabbled with different ways to help other widows. I have had many conversations around repartnering and dating after death, and people, I think, found that helpful because I think there's a real stigma around it, and the idea of trying to love again after losing your person, which to me is a little bit of a no-brainer because I feel like God created us as partners, and He wants companionship for us, and but that, you know, that was a short period of my life, and then once I sort of found my person, I felt like my ability to travel and to learn how to do it without spending much money could actually be helpful to other women because I know it provided so much relief for me. And so I have built my business around trying to help people learn how to do that. And so I work with other young widows, and not all young, some are empty nesters as well, but people who sort of have that zest for life still, but just feel like they could use the help knowing how to make it feasible. And so that's what I do for work.
Awesome, I love it. So that's rebuilding Joy Travel.
Yes.
Rebuilding Joy Travel.
And how,
Love
if
it.
somebody wanted to get in contact with you, how would they go by doing that?
Yeah, so you can, I'm primarily on Instagram. That's sort of where I've built my community. But I am building up my YouTube channel, so that's at Rebuilding Joy Travel as well. And then the program I run is called the Travel More Method for Widows. But that can all be found through those places.
Thanks. Okay.
So.
All right.
Right.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you
thanks for
so
asking.
much, Tiffany.
Yes,
We're so
thank
grateful
you.
that you're
yeah,
on
of
with us
course.
today and you're sharing your heart with us and with our audience as well. And I'm just going to ask one more thing. If you could pray for those out there
Oh, of
who are
course.
struggling
Amen.
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
grief. And
Yeah, absolutely. God, we just come to you today knowing that so many people's hearts are heavy from the things that they are going through. Lord, I know that you have them in your hands and in your arms, and you are carrying them through. But I pray especially for those people who feel like you have abandoned them or might be struggling with anger or frustration over their situation in life. I just pray that you would enliven that deep knowing within them that you are there and that you are guiding them even through these really challenging times. And I pray that those who might have strayed away from you or have found comfort in other things would find their way back to you and to your path. And God, I thank you for the way that you are steady and you remain the same through time, even though our situations change and fluctuate, that deep down that we know that you are always there for us. And we love you, Lord. Amen.
amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.